Chapter 6. Come and let us return unto the Lord, for he hath torn, and he will heal us. He hath smitten, and he will bind us up. After 2 days will he revive us. In the third day he will raise us up, and we shall live in his sight. Then shall we know if we follow on to know the Lord. His going forth is prepared as the morning, and he shall come unto us as the rain, as the latter and former rain upon the earth. O Ephraim, what shall I do unto thee? O Judah, what shall I do unto thee? For your goodness is as a morning cloud, and as the early dew it goeth away. Therefore have I hewed them by the prophets. I have slain them by the words of my mouth, and thy judgments are as the light that goeth forth. For I desired mercy, not sacrifice, and the knowledge of the Lord more than burnt offerings. But they like men have transgressed the covenant. There have they dealt treacherously against me. Gilead is the city of them that work iniquity, and is polluted with blood. And as troops of robbers wait for a man, so the company of priests murder in the way by consent, for they commit lewdness. I have seen an horrible thing in the house of Israel. There is a whoredom of Ephraim. Israel is defiled. Also, O Judah, he hath set a harvest for thee, when I return the captivity of my people. Chapter 6 basically could be classified as a call to Israel to return to the Lord, even though the Lord recognizes that Israel has committed spiritual adultery by worshiping all these other false gods and has played the harlot with him. His love is strong, steadfast, and continuing, and he has called upon her to repent and turn back to him. That's his whole tone of this whole book. And in verse 2, if 1 day is equal to 1,000 years, as is talked about, we don't know that for sure. You can't count on that exactly. But it's an interesting concept to think about. Then, and that's talked about in 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 8. If you think about that, then somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 years from the time Hosea is talking, which is about now, okay, Israel would be restored to the promised land, and the blessings would start to be restored, and there would be a time of proof and time of giving Israel time to reorient herself towards being a faithful wife again, and that time would be there. Interesting, 1948, 60 years ago, 61 years ago this year, that just a blink of an eye in the Lord's time, the country of Israel came into existence. Hasn't been the country of Israel for over 2,000 years. Interesting. Now, in verse 3 is a call to Israel to actively seek the knowledge of God. And it makes the comment, but basically, the love of the Lord is as constant, as dependable as the morning sunrise, and as beneficial and as much a blessing as the former and latter rains. Now, if you've never been a farmer, and especially if you've never been a farmer in Israel, you have no idea of just how critical the former and the latter rains are. But the one thing as a farmer that you really do want to have is you want to make sure you have enough moisture at the right time. You don't want it raining when you're trying to harvest the grain. You don't want it muddy when you're trying to plow. The former rains, which occurred in the late fall, were enough to moisten the ground, make it easy to plow, and there was enough moisture so that when you would broadcast the grain on it, that the grain would have enough moisture in the soil to sprout. And then in March, April, May, there was latter rains. And I don't mean over that whole period of time, but small rains over that time period. And other times there was not likely to be any rain whatsoever. But late March, all the way through April, sometimes into May, there would be some rain. And this was absolutely fabulous timing for the grain, because the grain would use that rain to actually, the plants, which were a type of grass, which all grain is a type of grass, uses that moisture to actually produce the grain itself. The sunlight helps make the carbohydrate, which makes the grain. But you have to have the water in order to make the grain, otherwise you don't have any grain. And so those things make it possible to live, just as the blessings of the Lord make it possible to live eternally. Now, verse 6 has a noted, well, probably you don't note it necessarily, but is one verse that was referred to twice by the Lord. He referred people who were condemning him for having changed the standards of worship or something. Israel totally lacked what in Hebrew is called, and I'm not sure I'm pronouncing this right, I don't think it's Hesed, is how it looks, H-E-S-E-D. And it's very, very hard to translate that into English, because we don't have words that convey all of the connotations, all the side meanings of that word. But basically, I'm going to translate it as absolute commitment to the other person. And in a marriage relationship, if you're going to have Hesed or Hesed between you, it's a two-way thing where each of you are doing the same thing. Each of you has made a total commitment to the other person. The husband to the wife to the husband. And you've made that for two sets of reasons. First set of reason is because the other person is doing it for you. It may not be the most important reason, but very often in human relationships, you love somebody because first they love you. So you're returning what you receive. Secondly, because in your heart, it would absolutely destroy you if you thought that anything you had done had caused hurt or fear or terror or disappointment to come to your companion. You would rather die than do anything to make them sad. Now, this understanding of this cannot be manipulated. You cannot have somebody who takes advantage of another person and have a marriage that lasts throughout eternity. If there's any manipulation involved, if there's anybody who's trying to take advantage of another person involved, then the relationship is fraudulent from the beginning. And the Lord is counted on as giving the absolute, total, perfect, constant, total commitment absolutely to Israel. Israel is making it really hard for that to really happen the way it should, because Israel is playing the harlot, the whore, and going after other lovers. Now, what the Lord wants is He doesn't want to be worshipped as such. In here, it makes the comments that what He wants, we don't want to take it to the point where it looks like He doesn't want the sacrifices of the worship. He does. But what He wants is intelligent understanding of what the function is of the worship. He wants a knowledge of God, not just somebody throwing some meat on an altar. Okay? He wants a broken heart and a contrite spirit, not just killing an animal. He wants the emotional and spiritual connotation, side understandings of these things, not just the blind, dumb performing. And the problem with Israel was, always it seemed, that they would do the blind, dumb performance sometimes. But they never learned anything, it seemed. They never understood any of the symbolism, and no matter how many prophets showed up and told them, they never got the message. They never cared to. They were ready to throw everything the Lord had done totally away, just because it was a little more complicated than the worship of Baal and Ashtoreth and burning incense up on some hill someplace and having some pornographic worship happen in front of you. And the Lord was really tired of that. And that's eventually why they had judgments come upon them. They brought the judgments because of their own refusal to love and be loved.